Today's episode is very special.
It is.
Do you want to tell listeners why?
Sure. Well, I'm so excited to have two of my favorite colleagues and people, Kristin Ditlow and my hubby, James Flora.
We do, in fact, have the James Flora and Kristin Ditlow in the studio to set the stage for the big collab between the Santa Fe Opera and University of New Mexico that we've been building up all season.
Kristin Ditlow is currently Associate Professor, Vocal Coaching and Opera Conductor at UNM. She began her career playing piano at age 5 and learned how to play open score, a skill that would serve her well, accompanying her high school choir.
From high school to Oberlin Conservatory of Music, she says that her gateway drug into opera was through playing the songs of Schumann and Beethoven for voice students during their lessons.
And from college, a whirlwind career includes Westminster Choir College, Tanglewood, and San Francisco Opera's Marilla program, and eventually conducting.
James Flora says he has been a musician his entire life. Both of his parents were music teachers, and his earliest recollection of singing in public was somewhere around age 2 or 3 with his mom's church choir. He went on to play the trumpet.
But Jamie wasn't originally going to pursue music as a career. He went to Ohio State to study engineering, but then got pulled into music through a scholarship opportunity. From there, he went to Florida State for his master's degree, followed by an engagement with the Arizona Opera, which happens to be where we met.
Aww. From there, Glimmerglass, Pittsburgh Opera, and he's been singing and teaching ever since.
All of this to say, as we discussed in the last 2 episodes, the road to your opera career can be long and winding,
with unexpected twists and turns along the way.
In this conversation, we're talking all about career trajectories,
collaborations,
and the academic journey for young artists. Have you ever wanted to know how an opera singer prepares on performance days?
Or what it's like on the other side of the audition table?
Or how to find the courage to take more creative risks in your own life and work?
I'm Anna Garcia with the Santa Fe Opera.
And I'm Olga Perez Flora with the University of New Mexico.
And in Season 6 of Key Change, we're pulling back the curtain
to reveal what it takes to build a rewarding and sustainable career in opera.
Illuminate just what can happen when you build meaningful partnerships with incredible collaborators.
And give you a sneak preview of the next generation of talent taking root right here in New Mexico.
And right here on Key Change. All right, hello.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, Anna.
We have a full house in the studio today.
Absolutely. Hi, Anna. Well, we have 2 guests from the University of New Mexico Opera Theater program with us today, Dr. Kristin Ditlow and Professor James Flora.
Happy to have you. Kristin, you have been a part of our Opera for All Voices premieres in the past. Can you tell us your experience preparing for new works?
That's a really wonderful question, and it's always a really wonderful experience because normally in opera, I would say the vast majority of things is that we are doing productions again. For example, all 5 of the Santa Fe Opera shows this summer, I know there's a new staging planned. The elements of the production are new, but the piece isn't new. Yet also, sometimes the main stage season has new works, big premieres, including in the past Cold Mountain and The Revolution of Steve Jobs. So it is always a delight to crack open a brand new score for the first time. And then what that also means sometimes, very often, is that you're getting new pieces that they're still being revised. And that was actually the case, which is exciting for the big works I've done with Opera for All Voices. The first one was a little bit of a jump in, but a lovely adventure. And this is something that I've been lucky to do at various points in my career. And I guess I'm good enough at it because I keep getting calls to do it, which was that for Laura Kaminsky's work, Hometown to the World, it was commissioned and then got mounted and premiered here in Santa Fe. It would have been December of, I want to say, 2021.
Yes. Hometown to the World by Laura Kaminsky and Kimberly Reed premiered in Santa Fe winter 2021 and tells a story of 3 individuals at the intersection of race, religion, ethnicity, and culture, following the 2008 U.S. ice raid of America's largest kosher meatpacking plant in Postville, Iowa.
You can follow the trajectory of Hometown to the World from its original concept all the way to Broadway on Key Change, using the playlist we've created for you in the show notes.
And that was still heavy COVID time, of course. So with the opera caring for its employees in the wonderful way that it does, it had very strict rules about if you were exposed or if you had been infected, you had to isolate for a certain amount of time. What that meant was that their conductor and their pianist had to isolate both at the same time due to an exposure. And so I got a phone call. Andrea Fellows-Feinberg called me and she said, I don't know what you're doing this week. The answer would have been school. That was the honest answer. And I got the phone call. I was in Chicago, hired to play Central City Opera's auditions, flying home from Chicago, and I had to connect from Chicago, I want to say probably in Houston. And during the connection, I picked up a voicemail from her saying, we need you at Santa Fe Opera tomorrow, and I'm going to email you the score.
The bat signal, yes.
And so I showed up. What she didn't tell me, which was that Laura Kaminsky, the composer, would be there.
Wow.
So it's one thing to sort of get musicians ready when the composer's not there. It's a different thing when the composer's there because all of a sudden you have to be a lot more honest.
Yeah.
But also, luckily, everyone knew exactly how long I had the music. So let's just say this did not suffer from over-practicing before I walked into the rehearsal space on Monday afternoon. And I said, well, here we go. And Laura and the cast and the team could not have been lovelier and more welcoming. And also, there's something when you have this experience, it's a bit like being the musical equivalent of a tow truck driver, is that everyone's just real excited to see you. And it doesn't matter if page 45 has all the right notes. They're very excited to see this tow truck.
Yeah.
That's a great way of saying that.
So I listened to the wonderful debut episode, and the three of you, so Anna and Olga and Andrea, spoke so beautifully about things being an ecosystem. And that's part of the ecosystem. Part of an ecosystem is that you have a long time to prepare something. You get a contract well in advance. You're learning something. For singers, they're getting something into their voice. For conductors, coaches, we're getting something certainly into our bodies and into our ears so that we can be the best practitioners and advocates for the score.
Can I interrupt for just a second? However, I just want to say this about my colleague, and I don't say this lightly. She has maybe the best ears I know.
Jamie, that means a lot.
I'm not kidding.
Aww.
It's true.
It's true. She is a world-class musician.
Yeah.
That means a lot. So while I wipe my tear away and continue.
This happens. We cry a lot in this booth.
I cry a lot specifically.
It's really true. Kristin looks at a score and hears it with a clarity and a substance that very few people on the planet do.
Well, thank you. But in order to get there, you have to start somewhere and you have to keep going. And that also means just showing up to the score every day and showing up practicing every day. And I can almost guarantee these days that when my first student of the day comes and knocks on my door for their coaching time, almost all the time I'm at the piano already. Also, almost all the time, espresso has already been made. And then I offer them another one. And then we keep going through the day, which is lovely. And opera is an Italian art form, so I'm just keeping the tradition alive, right?
Davvero.
So the experience with Laura Kaminsky on her show was incredibly singular and special. And then the next Opera for All Voices project that I got to do was more recently. It was actually the semester I had just gotten tenure and I was on sabbatical. And it was a piece about Fannie Lou Hamer and the right to vote and Civil Rights Act in the 60s, especially in the South, Mississippi, Alabama. And that was a piece called This Little Light of Mine.
This Little Light of Mine by Chandler Carter and Diana Solomon Glover also premiered in Santa Fe in the fall of 2022 and just had a run at Kentucky Opera in February of 2025.
We've created another playlist for you in the show notes so you can follow this opera's evolution too.
Another thing that we could all talk about for days, and books should be written, and I'm sure some have been written, and maybe a few shouldn't be written, but about the relationships that come out of the opera business.
We could write a book.
Yeah, we could write a book that all names should be changed.
Redacted.
But that was also a terrific experience. 4 of our students, so talk about really building really important inroads about how UNM and Santa Fe Opera are continuing to collaborate and how they have in the past. That was a really fun experience for 4 of our students. They were chorus members, they were all part of this incredible world premiere experience. And they also, too, world premiere operas are a moving, changing animal. And this is exciting. It's an exciting part of the process where you get in the room, the composer has written something in a certain way for particular voices, and then you get the bodies there, you get the voices there, and then there's different suggestions made.
Yeah.
What can also happen, which is super funny, and this is also, by the way, how Champagne was made in the monastery. It was made by accident, is that inevitably a mistake is made by someone. The coach, the pianist plays the wrong note, the singer sings something not what the composer wrote, and the composer immediately hears it and says, I like that better. I'm changing it. Or they'll experiment with tempi. They'll experiment with the length of a transition. So I remember with also This Little Light of Mine, there was a scene in the sort of the final third of the piece where once we got into the rehearsal process and the staging process, everyone together, including the director, the librettist, the conductor, and the composer said, this is slightly too long. One section is slightly too long. We're going to alter this just a little bit. And then, of course, with technology being what it is these days with engraving software, that's code for people not in the industry of software that you use to notate music. That's what that means.
Thank you for that.
You can have versions saved. Actually, Kentucky Opera is doing the show in February of 2025, I believe. And so I am sure that they are taking every note possible from Santa Fe's production from October of 2022, and then they will also have different choices to be made. I think someone else is conducting that production. Some of the cast is the same, some of the cast is different. So that's exactly what opera has to be, though, right? It's just it keeps evolving because, especially for the great Puccini operas, for example, none of those people are alive anymore. So you have to continue to pass the torch.
So, Jamie, how does your performing experience inform your teaching and vice versa?
I was thinking about this, and the thing that popped into my mind first is a quote by Lamperti. He says, the golden rule of singing is knowing the result before we utter a sound. And unlike Italy and France and Germany, opera is not as embedded into our culture. And what I find as a teacher is the students don't know the sound. And just being around professionals, doing it at a high level, just allows me to remember what that is, what the goals are, what the level of intonation is, what the level of resonance is, and understanding what is required so that I can remind my students that this is the standard and this is what we're trying to do and this is the sound, so that we really know the sound. And I think that's just so paramount as a singer, because unlike other things, you can't see the keyboard, you can't see where your finger is on the fretboard. It just has to be in your mind. It's audiation. It's the ultimate kind of expression of audiation. And so being able to communicate that with my students, it just constantly reminds me of that. And then the other piece that I was thinking about was, this is such a unique business and nobody else does business this way. And so all of the little ins and outs and intricacies of the business, how to deal with music staff, how to deal with conductors, how to deal with directors, how to deal with agents, how to deal with general directors and artistic directors and other artists. It's a very different world, and it has its own culture, and it's loosely tied to certain elements of Italian culture, but it's its own thing. And it's a good reminder once, I'm performing about what that is, and then any kind of interaction that's unusual, I can bring back and talk to the kids about. This kind of thing happens that may not happen if you work in an office somewhere. And so I think that's really important. But the most important thing is that understanding the sound, understanding how to communicate, and just getting the chance to do it just invigorates me and lets me bring that kind of fire back to the students.
Wow. Well said. Kristin, the same question for you. How does your performing and conducting experience inform your teaching and vice versa?
Well, they go hand in hand. Whenever I leave UNM to go do a project away of any sort of length, when I come back then from those engagements, I feel like I've gone through another refinement process. When you're away, you have to land. You have to work with very often a cast you don't know or some of the cast you don't know. You sometimes have to work with a director you don't know. The idea and the understanding is that, of course, you know the piece of music. That's not always the case with everyone, but we have to make sure that we're really very well prepared and that you can make adjustments on a moment's notice. But then also when I come back then to teach, I'm able to say, wow, I heard this audition aria for the first time. I heard someone use this as an audition aria. And then I can absolutely steal that idea and use it for my students. And I'm able to tell them, well, I was just away. I was judging a competition. And then I can come back to my students and say, this is what's happening right now. And I'm going to steal these 3 ideas. And there are some other things that I'm observing happening that we're not going to go in that direction. And we're going to continue what we're doing here. And then also, whenever you're a conductor or on music staff collaborating with someone or a group of people, by nature, there is some teaching involved in that task. I remember the summer after I was at Tanglewood, so I was there in 2004, 2005, that was James Levine's first summer there. And one of the many things they did that summer, so it's the BSO's, the Boston Symphony Orchestra Summer Home. And Mr. Levine at that point had been at the Met and at Boston. And on the docket for one of the many weeks of the festival was Götterdämmerung, which is a giant, wonderful piece of music. It's the 4th massive opera in Wagner's Ring Cycle, and it in and of itself is, I think, 4.5 hours of run time. Santa Fe's doing a different number of the Ring Cycle. They're doing the 2nd opera this summer as a teaser, which is so exciting.
So exciting.
So I had been back at Tanglewood visiting friends, and I happened to be there the week that Mr. Levine was rehearsing this Wagner opera. And Mr. Levine and the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the Tanglewood Music Center fellows and hired professionals who sing this repertoire very often, but also with opera, sometimes you get people from vastly different backgrounds. Some people are doing something for the first time. Some people are doing something for the 40th time. And you have not a lot of time to make everything come together in a cohesive way. And that makes the process exciting and challenging. But I remember watching Mr. Levine rehearse very calmly, very in and amongst music that has a ton of changes, many, many textures, can be some of the loudest music the world has ever heard, and that's not an exaggeration. And this is without amplification, keep this in mind. So this is not Spinal Tap going up to 11. This is just nature happening with what voices and instruments can do, and it's so tremendously exciting. But turn the page in any Wagner opera, and just for fun, you can now download full scores for free. You can go to a website that we all use. We can maybe put it in the show notes later, but you can download these scores, and it looks like, if you don't know what you're looking at, it kind of looks like a mess, meaning there's a lot of all these symbols on the pages, vocabulary words that very often have to be translated, and he's looking at this as if it's, his address book, and he knows exactly what everything is, and he's just going, okay, second horns, violas, when you split, you need a little bit more bite on the bow. And then chorus, this half was a little bit late, very calmly. And he's looking and listening to this incredibly complex, challenging music. And he was, in a sense, teaching this group of people, many of whom are the best professionals in the business, sort of his version of how it went. And it was tremendous to watch. And it was even more tremendous to watch this as a young person and go, no one is ever above being a student of something, and no one is ever above teaching something. We are all teachers.
Well said. Jamie and Kristin and I have this wonderful habit of coming together after we've done a gig and talking it out and saying...
A debrief, if you will.
Exactly. That's exactly right. A debrief. And we learn from each other about, what was this experience and what was it like? What can we bring to the table? We often will bring new ideas to each other that we incorporate in our opera program at UNM.
As we mentioned, part of why we invited Jamie and Kristin to Key Change was because of this year's brand new partnership between the University of New Mexico and the Santa Fe Opera.
You'll hear more about that from the young voices and UNM students in the next episode.
So, to set the scene, Kristin, Jamie, can you tell us about the opera program at UNM?
I'll start because I've been there the longest. I cannot believe that this is my 11th year
Awesome.
at the helm musically of the program. The position that I have, which has evolved with me, which has also been super lovely, and that is a testament to a healthy place that is willing to grow along with its faculty and allow the faculty to grow in a position. But the program, it's not the smallest, it's not the biggest in the country. So it's somewhere in a happy medium, happy center. Fall tends to be a scenes program. Sometimes we've done a chamber opera of some shape or another, or it's scenes. And then the spring is a larger production that is fully produced and fully staged with lights and costumes. We take over the lovely recital hall every late March, early April, and we sort of invade it. We move a set into it. We take the pit out. We then have to put the pit back in at the end of the production. And then we transform a recital hall into wherever. So we transform it into a magical place like we did for Magic Flute, or we transform it into Downton Abbey sort of sitting room and palace like we did last year for Le Nozze di Figaro. And I'm sure that Santa Fe's set will be larger than ours when they do Figaro this summer. But it's been a delight, and it's been fantastic to watch students come through the program and grow. So, for example, Svibat Ashera, who was just recently an apprentice this past summer, he's now on a tremendous amount of scholarship and I'm sure tearing the place apart at Rice University doing his master's degree. So hi, Svi, if you're listening. But Svi started, in terms of UNM opera, he started in the chorus of Pirates of Penzance. So he was a pirate, second pirate to the right or whatever it would have been. And he would have been homeschooling at the time, I think. So we let him do it, I want to say his senior year of high school, but he expressed interest in doing it. And so we said, well, sure, we need more pirates. So yes. And then he went on to be in the ensemble when we did Così fan tutte. And then ensemble for Dido and Aeneas, which we did online. And that was Olga's and my favorite time ever producing an opera. No, I'm kidding. It was, we filmed the whole opera in isolation.
I've heard stories.
Yeah, all the stories are true.
To be clear, we recorded this during the pandemic, and it was tricky, but we made it work. You can actually even take a peek at the recording on YouTube.
We'll link it in the show notes.
And then he did major roles. So he did Papageno and Flute and Figaro and Figaro. It was the title role.
Yeah.
So it is so tremendous that we can give students this opportunity where we will utilize them and use them.
Yeah.
They will be busy.
We use undergrads, which I think is different than a lot of opera programs. We have about 20 to 30 students, depending on a given year, in the opera studio. We have about 50 to 60 voice students. And so about half of them-ish are in the opera studio. And we encourage freshmen to be involved, and we let them do small roles and small bits in the scenes production in the fall. And then they'll take more of a, chorus role or very small compromario role in the spring production is typically what we've done. And then we hope to grow them, to give them experience on the stage, to give them experience learning music. Almost every student I've ever taught, when you hand them a score of an opera, it looks like a phone booth from Chicago. I mean, it's huge, and they get overwhelmed. How can I learn all of this music? And so teaching them score study and teaching them how to learn a show and giving them small pieces helps them kind of grow. So I think one thing that's nice about UNM and the size that we are, we allow room for growth even from the youngest students on. Like as soon as they get there, if they want to participate, we're going to find a place for them.
Yeah, and I will add that I think a great thing that we do is we audition the students and then we pick the show. So we really cater the show to the students that we have so that they can grow and be learning. We often double cast to make sure that every graduate student has a role. And then we have some covers for our younger, more successful singers. And this spring, we'll be doing Little Women by Mark Adamo, based on Louisa May Alcott's beautiful novel. And I'm so excited about this because it's one of my very favorite stories.
It really is.
We happen to have a situation where we had a student who's just not going to be able to fulfill the role of Meg. And so one of our sophomores who was covering is going to step in and do that role, which is just an incredible opportunity and just highlights that we really are an educational institution that is working for our students in opera. Little Women did, in fact, open to rave reviews. Both casts are doing an amazing job bringing the score to life. In fact, I told the singers that they made the show shimmer.
Love it. And now for our lightning round with Jamie and Kristin. I'm going to pick a question out of a hat here. Jamie, what is it like working in a two-singer household?
It's intense. I wouldn't have it any other way. I was raised in that environment myself. And so everyone in my family sang. I can't imagine members of my family not singing or being involved actively in music making. And so, when we both have a performance together, everything gets turned up to 11, as we said before. It gets really, it gets intense, but I love performing with Olga. I will say when we met performing at Arizona Opera, and the first 2 years that we were together, the year and a half before we got married, and then that last 6 months after we got married, where we were in Arizona, I think we did 13 of 19 shows possible that we did together.
Wow.
This was pre-kids.
This is before children.
Anybody who's listening who has kids.
And I will say that one of the things that sealed the deal was one of our first shows that we did together. Well, we didn't even do the shows, I don't think, together, but we were in New Jersey Opera Theater in Princeton, and we had to drive from Arizona to New Jersey.
That's right. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
And
that'll do it.
And we got along. We had a great time. I had a great time. I shouldn't speak for Olga.
Apparently, I had a great time. Except what I remember is I was singing Sita and Skiki, and they called me to say, the Dorabella has to come late. Can you quickly learn Dorabella so anybody who knows Così knows that this is a lot
of music.
So Jamie did most of the driving while I was learning.
Yeah.
Dorabella.
That's why it's a little different. The story's a little different on his end.
All right, Kristin. Anna and I have talked about what we wear to operas and to premieres. So tell us a little bit, because I know you and I both love to shop and we love fashion. So where do you like to get your outfits before you go to one of these big events?
Well, I should probably up my game about what I wear to important premieres and things like that. And also the answer is different if I have something to do, like if I'm playing in it.
Sure.
Or if I'm attending it only.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
The answer would be probably kind of all over. And then I always am thinking, well, what can go with whatever? So this past summer, I was conducting in Italy. And then at the end of my time there, my husband and I were in Florence, walking by a shop it was a leather shop of shoes, belts, bags, of which there are many in Florence.
Mm-hmm.
Very much candy for the eyes and not candy for the wallet.
Yep.
But so we walked by and I passed a fabulous pair of shoes. Like red, pink leather shoes with a heel. They're fantastic shoes. And I walked by those and I said, I want to come back to this shop tomorrow and try those on, because it was 11 at night and the shop was closed.
Did you go back?
I not only went back, I bought the shoes.
Oh my gosh.
I love these shoes. They do not go outside, but I actually did.
They are not for wearing.
Right. So they go in the bag, but I did wear them to Santa Fe Opera's. I saw Rosenkavalier this summer.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then I went to see our very proud student alum, Tzvi, who I mentioned earlier in the show. So for the second night of scenes, I wore these shoes as well. I mean, no one really knew or cared except me, but I was very proud of these shoes.
Oh, I love it. That's so great.
I think I want to pull on the string. Kristin, how do you prepare for performance days?
Depends on what I'm doing, if I'm playing or conducting, because the answer is different.
Okay, hit me.
But first of all, the day starts with two very important ingredients. One is yoga, the other is espresso.
Important.
So let's start with that.
Does the order matter?
Espresso usually first if I'm up early enough.
Got it.
I have a hot yoga studio I go to pretty religiously when I'm in town in Albuquerque 5-6 days a week. And the early class is 6 a.m. So if I'm really on it, I'm up at 5:15, which is enough time to get out of bed, get changed, make an espresso shot, and get to the studio before 6. For a day where I have to play, a proper warm-up is absolutely necessary. So I play scales and arpeggios, and Brahms' 51 exercises, not all 51. That's too tedious and too long, but I cycle through them. So I make sure I'm just in tip-top shape and that everything is working properly. Fingers are warmed up and arm weight is feeling good and I can sound like I need to sound. For conducting, I make sure that, and for both of these things actually, I make sure I have as much alone time as I can the day of a performance. That it's not a lot of social, like a big social event right before. These are part of the business and I enjoy them. It's more important to me the day of a show that I have the right amount of focus and the right amount of solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me means, unfortunately, not a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that means planning ahead of time. So sometimes when my family has come in for a show, they've learned over the years, the day of, they need to entertain themselves because I can't go into host mode and then play or conduct something because sometimes the shows are several hours of music.
Yep.
And that requires a single-mindedness and a focus for which I need proper amount of silence and time alone to prepare.
I want to follow up that Kristin and Jamie and I all worked at Steamboat Opera in 2022. Yeah, 2022. Kristin was conducting and I was directing Laurie Laitman's The Three Feathers. And Kristin and I have a lovely tradition of getting each other a little gift on opening night. And so we know each other well enough that we knew we weren't going to be spending the day together. Although if I recall, we went to yoga together that morning, that outdoor fantastic yoga class. Yeah.
That is right.
And then, we spent some time alone and doing whatever we needed to do. But I wanted to go to this jewelry shop and I wanted to get her some local jewelry. And I was there and I was checking out. And all of a sudden I hear her laugh. And I turn around and she's standing right next to me. We're standing next to each other, buying each other a gift. And we just started howling laughing. And the shop owner was like, "What's so funny?" "Oh, we're both here buying each other a little gift."
I love that.
Yeah.
Jamie, how do you prepare for show days?
Well, the night before, I need to get lots of sleep. And I already kind of start a hydration regimen because for me, it's singing. Almost everything, I'm going to be singing. So I need to be hydrated and I need rest. And then I get up and I have a regular morning, almost like any morning. I like to keep routine. And something that I teach my students is we have a warm-up that we all do. We do the same pitch levels, the same exercises. I have about 5 or 7 exercises that we do, and we do them in order. And that's a way, like an athlete, to check in to your instrument, to understand what your body's doing that day and how it feels. Well, so first I will go for some sort of light exercise, walk, yoga, stretching, but mostly walking or yoga. And then I'll get to the theater probably 2 hours before, if it's an opera, and at least. And before I get in costume, I want to be warm. So I will do my warm up and then I get in costume, I get in makeup, and then I start looking at anything that I need to go over. Is it staging that I need to remember? Is it linguistic things that are difficult? Is it a certain just pitches? I mean, in Little Women that UNM's going to do, the prologue for Laurie is quite challenging. It is quite challenging. It's one of the most challenging pieces of music I've ever sung. So, if I have a piece of music like that, then I need to really look at that snippet of music and really go through it and make sure it's solid in my mind before I step out on the stage. And after I do that, I kind of calm and I do some breathing to slow myself down. I teach my students that, we need to know, are we fight, flight, or freezers? Because we have to know how to thaw. We have to know how to calm down. We have to know how to amp ourselves up if we need to get hyped up. And for me, I need to calm down. So I do some breathing. And then right before I go out on stage, I will probably do some arpeggiation just through my entire range just to make sure that I'm ready to go. And then I step on stage and go have fun. It's fun for me.
I think I'm a freezer.
Yeah. So you have to thaw first and then you have to figure out, then do you need to calm down or do you need to amp up,
Chris and Jamie, what are you excited to see on stage this summer at the Santa Fe Opera?
I think everything, which is not an answer. So I'll qualify this a bit further. Turn of the Screw is, I think, a masterpiece chamber opera. The 3 Britten chamber operas, which are Turn of the Screw, The Rape of Lucretia, and Albert Herring, those 3 works are really important in terms of what is possible for opera. Britain had a really particular imagination when it came to, okay, the orchestra's now one per part, meaning one player per part. So before that, the tradition would have been quite a number of violins and usually doubling the woodwinds and having brass or not. That depends on when the opera was written. And then all of a sudden he takes it and pares it way down, and then he makes it essentially a concerto, sometimes concerto-like difficulty, soloist-level playing required for the instruments. And Turn, surprisingly, I think I've conducted at this point 11 performances of it. So it's a favorite piece of mine, and I'm thrilled to see it on stage. And that's probably my answer, although I also think Die Walküre has one of the most perfect acts of opera that exist, which is the first act, I think is a perfect act of opera.
I am excited to see Die Walküre, and this is really dumb, but it's because when I was a little boy, I loved Star Wars, and then because of Star Wars,
dumb.
because I love Star Wars, I've discovered Wagner, and I was a trumpet player as well, and that was why I played the trumpet, and it will just be so awesome to hear that orchestra play that score and the great singers that Santa Fe brings, and also. The first opera that I fell in love with was La Bohème. And to hear La Bohème, and then the first role that I fell in love with was the Duke. And so to hear Rigoletto and to hear Duke sing the Duke will be lovely. Duke Kim.
So exciting.
Is a lovely singer, an exciting singer. And we got to see him, I think, in Midsummer Night's Dream. And so to see him do this kind of a role, it's a different thing, and that's exciting. So I'm really excited for those things. And every year, since we've been here, we go to the Industry Day. And that's exciting in a different way. It's so cool to see the young artists or the apprentice artists get their shot in front of most of the opera industry and see how they perform. It helps me as a teacher learn what the standard is, because these folks singing on the stage are kind of what we're aiming for our students. And to be lucky enough to have had a student do that last summer was really fantastic. And so I'm excited to see that this summer. A fun story about last summer and Svi being on stage, he sang Papageno's Suicide aria. And in the middle of the aria, you have to count. And he's tempting the gods, saying, if I don't have my true love by the count of 3, I'm going to kill myself. And as a native New Mexican, this could only work for Svi. He went eins, which is 1, zwei, 2, thunderclap.
Yeah.
No lie.
Everybody jumped out of their seats.
Everybody jumped, and Svi completely played up. He was like, why? And it got a huge laugh, and everybody, they clapped, I think, in that moment. And it was just so gratifying to see him succeed at that level, and to see something like that again this summer is exciting as well.
So, friends, if you could wave a magic wand and usher in one new idea for the opera world, what would that be?
I would love for opera to step away a little bit from exclusivity. Opera has always been, in this country, had an element, at least, of exclusivity. And I think the more we can be inclusive, the more we can become part of the community, the way that Santa Fe Opera is part of a community. It's really refreshing to come from out of state. We moved from out of state to come here 4 years ago, and to see how ingrained Santa Fe Opera is in the state of New Mexico. And not every opera company is that way. And I don't think they try to leave out other areas of the state, but I do think that it becomes this little community that becomes very tight-knit in towns all over the United States in opera companies. And I think that leaves a lot of people out. I think a lot of people that grew up in small towns like I didn't understand that opera was for them, and that opera is for everyone. And I think the more that we can do that, the better. To follow a business model, I would follow what wine has done, because when I was young, wine was only what certain people drank, and now it's kind of ubiquitous. And in American culture, the way it is ubiquitous in Italian or French culture. And I would love to see opera become ubiquitous in the same way because of its ability to be inclusive. I think we tell great stories. I think we tell stories that people need to hear.
We're storytellers.
Yes. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's a story. They think it's something else. And I think that it doesn't translate well on a speaker. That, we've done all this work with television screens and monitors to make them super high def, but you can't get the same level of resonance spectrum that you get in the hall with an opera singer. And that's part of what's exciting about that sound that just jumps out over the orchestra, and sharing that with kids. Because when kids hear that and when people hear that have never heard it before, it's often life-changing for them. But they don't even know, and they don't think it's for them, and they think it's exclusive. And so I hope that we can make it more inclusive, that this is for everyone to experience.
Love that.
And continuing on that thought, opera is woven into the culture in Europe. Now, for the most part, opera, aside from new works that we've commissioned in America that tell American stories like Little Women that Olga mentioned earlier, we have those that are unique to us. But for the most part, the things that are done in the States, these are imported goods.
Yeah.
Right? Some of the stories are quite old. Almost all the languages are foreign. Or the tradition now is that we do things in what we call the original language. And that was not the case 60 years ago. So to wave my own magic wand, it would be to magically change the attention span of the audience, because I think people are now addicted to shorts. And listen, I watch Instagram reels just like the next person. I'm as guilty of this as all. But if I have the proper amount of time, I will sit and watch an act of an opera, and it'll feel like it's 5 minutes, and it's not 5 minutes. It's much longer than that. And where I think also audiences have gotten, I think our relationship with the idea of comfort, I believe it to be skewed in both directions. I think in some aspects, people will watch blockbuster movies where it's CGI and monsters invading whatever and aliens blowing things up and this and that. And they say, oh, opera's not believable. Well, excuse me.
Pause.
Okay, it's not believable, but I just watched a human being actually sing this high C and then fall on the floor and die, or maybe they were singing the high C while falling on the floor and dying, which is actually really what opera's all about. Of course, just kidding, but there's an element of that. And then also, so they'll complain about something taking an inordinate amount of time. Well, I'm also old enough to remember a certain, we might have to cut this. It might be the best part of the podcast or not, but we'll see. I'm going to go with it. The white Bronco driving down the highway in the mid-90s, and we were all the whole country was stupidly watching this thing.
There was nothing else to watch.
Right. You know all exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And so people are like, oh.
That should be an opera.
But then they'll complain about the prologue in Act 1 of Götterdämmerung and like, oh, it's too long. Well,
good point.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe, whatever, So I think having people just sit with, really sit in a deeper way, in an artistic way, with the idea of the unknown and with slight discomfort.
Yeah.
In a way like, wow, I'm listening to dissonant music. Or I'm listening to something where I don't really know what's going to happen.
But they hear dissonant music all the time.
In film scores
films, they
and video
hear it all
games.
the times. I mean, da-da, da-da.
Right.
That's dissonance right there.
Right, or the psycho chords in the wonderful Bernard Herrmann score to Psycho, the Alfred Hitchcock movie. So they can tolerate it in those things.
In that context. But again, I think that's about exclusivity. It's about thinking, oh, this is only for a certain set of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep coming back to the fact when I just sing in public randomly sometimes for folks, they're like, wow, that's opera? I'm like, yep, that's opera.
Mm-hmm.
And they get excited about it. Or if we take people to Santa Fe or we see people at Santa Fe that we know that had never been to the opera before, and they're just like, oh my God, we didn't know this was possible. Mm-hmm. And that's really awesome. And I wish that Santa Fe could share that with the rest of the country, that model of being ingrained in the community in that particular way.
I want to just make a little shout out to, there's so many regional companies that are doing that really beautifully right now. Jamie and I have friends at Opera Company Middlebury where we sing a lot, and they do a great job of this.
Yes.
So I do believe there are a lot of grassroots and small regional companies who are doing this. The beauty of Santa Fe is the power of Santa Fe and the magical quality of what Santa Fe Opera is doing, both world-class opera and reaching out to the community. And I'm going to wave my magic wand and say it was great to have both of you with us today in the studio.
It was great to be here. Thank you
Great
for
to be
having
here.
us.
Next time on Key Change,
The young voices of the Santa Fe Opera at the University of New Mexico.
masterclasses, repertoire workshops, and more.
What did our young artists learn, and how will it impact their future? Key Change is a production of the Santa Fe Opera, Department of Community Engagement and Education.
We are produced and edited by Andrea Klunder at the Creative Imposter Studios.
I'm Anna Garcia.
And I'm Olga Perez Flora.
Our audio engineers are Colin Ungerleider and Cabby at Cabby Sound Studios in Santa Fe.
Technical direction by Edwin R. Ruiz.
Production support from Alex Riegler.
Show notes by Lisa Witter.
This podcast is made possible due to the generous support of the Hankins Foundation, principal education sponsor of the Santa Fe Opera.
To learn more, visit us at santafeopera.org/keychange.
And follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at the Santa Fe Opera.
Here's the thing, the three of us, Kristin and Jamie and I, spend a lot of time, an inordinate amount of time in our kitchen drinking wine and talking. So this can go many different ways.
Yeah,
and it should be just fun and easy.
Yeah. How is that inordinate, by the way? I think every syllabus should be planned over proper beverages and snacks.
I agree.
People who plan their syllabus in the library are just plain doing it wrong.
Yes.
No, you're right. We are definitely doing it very well. I just mean an inordinate amount of time.
That's
It's a lot of time.